No,
this
stop
great
that.
search.
I'm not blaming anybody other than you. You're not keeping your word. You said that you would release all of the materials
Has
under your
anyone
direct
released
control.
more information on Epstein than I have? Has
Well,
anyone?
Much
Did
more.
Comey? Did Ray?
Much more.
Did they?
Excuse me. Much more has come out in the days since the American people in Congress have been demanding it. But it's coming out in dribs and drabs. Why don't you just release the entire file as you promised to do? Well, most other new FBI directors drew on their experience as FBI agents. You didn't have that. But you did write a picture book trilogy for children ages 5 and up based on your experience clashing with President Trump's political enemies. In your book, you describe your literary alter ego, Kash the Knight, as a wacky, easily bored wizard carrying out King Donald's vengeance by driving his enemies out of the kingdom. In the books, King Donald is besieged by the evil Hillary Queentown, but saved in the end by Kash. Then Kash goes on to catch mules who are stealing the 2020 election for the great King Donald from Sleepy Joe. And then in the third book, Kash takes down the Dragon of the Jalapenos, nicknamed
A recent congressional hearing in the United States drew significant public attention after a tense exchange unfolded between Congressman Jamie Raskin and the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Kash Patel. The hearing focused largely on long-standing questions surrounding the case of Jeffrey Epstein and the broader debate about transparency regarding the files connected to that investigation. For years, the Epstein case has remained one of the most controversial criminal investigations in recent American history. Numerous questions have persisted about the individuals who may have been connected to Epstein's network and whether all available evidence has been fully disclosed. During this hearing, those concerns once again became a central topic as lawmakers sought clarification from the FBI's current leadership. The exchange began when Congressman Jamie Raskin referenced comments that Kash Patel had made in the past, before becoming FBI director. Raskin reminded the hearing room that Patel had previously criticized the FBI for what he believed was a lack of transparency regarding the Epstein case. In those earlier remarks, Patel had suggested that key information related to Epstein's associates and contacts should be made public, even if the disclosures proved uncomfortable for powerful individuals. To emphasize his point, Raskin played clips and quoted statements from Patel's earlier interviews. In those recordings, Patel had argued that the American public deserved to know the full truth about Epstein's activities and the people connected to his network. At the time, Patel had suggested that if the relevant documents were under the authority of federal investigators, then the appropriate officials had the power to release them. This is where the hearing began to intensify. Raskin pointed out that Patel now holds the position of FBI director, meaning he currently oversees the very institution he had once criticized. With that authority in mind, Raskin asked a straightforward question. If Patel had previously insisted that such information should be released, why had the full set of Epstein-related files not yet been made public? The question introduced a central theme that would dominate the hearing, the issue of transparency versus legal limitation. In response, Kash Patel defended the FBI's actions. He stated that the Bureau had released all materials that could legally be made public. According to Patel, the agency must operate within the framework of existing court orders and legal restrictions. He emphasized that multiple federal courts have jurisdiction over evidence connected to the Epstein investigation, and that the FBI cannot simply release information if doing so would violate those legal boundaries. Patel explained that while some materials have been disclosed over time, other documents remain restricted because they are tied to ongoing legal processes, sealed records, or court-protected evidence. He stressed that the FBI must follow federal law and judicial rulings, regardless of political pressure or public curiosity. However, Raskin continued pressing the issue. He pointed out that the earlier comments made by Patel suggested that the FBI director had significant authority over the release of certain records. According to Raskin, the public debate has centered on whether that authority has been fully exercised. Raskin then asked about specific types of evidence that investigators had reportedly obtained during searches connected to Epstein. These included digital devices, financial records, emails, and other documents that could potentially shed light on the wider network surrounding the case. He questioned whether all of that material had been made available for public review, or whether significant portions remained withheld. Patel reiterated that any material under FBI control had been addressed through the legal process.
He explained that when the Bureau seeks to release sensitive records, it must request approval from federal courts. If judges determine that certain information cannot be disclosed, the FBI must comply with those rulings. At this stage in the hearing, the exchange reflected a broader tension that often arises during congressional oversight. Lawmakers seek maximum transparency and accountability, while federal agencies emphasize legal compliance and procedural limitations. The Epstein case, given its high-profile nature and the public interest surrounding it, has amplified this tension considerably. During the discussion, Raskin also referenced a different aspect of Patel's background that had previously attracted public attention. Before becoming FBI director, Patel had written a series of children's books. In those books, he created a fictional character inspired by himself, portrayed as a heroic figure navigating political conflicts in a fantasy-style storyline. Congressman Raskin brought up this detail during the hearing, reading excerpts and describing how Patel had depicted the fictional character as a knight-like figure serving a king and confronting political adversaries. The congressman used this example to raise questions about Patel's public persona and the narrative surrounding his political career. This moment added an unusual dimension to the hearing. While the topic of the children's books was not directly related to the Epstein investigation, it highlighted the broader political context in which the discussion was taking place. Congressional hearings sometimes involve rhetorical strategies designed to challenge a witness's credibility or past statements. Patel did not focus extensively on the book references. Instead, he redirected the conversation toward the operational work of the FBI. He cited statistics and enforcement actions carried out by the Bureau, particularly in areas such as child exploitation investigations and criminal enforcement actions. According to Patel, the agency has significantly increased arrests related to crimes against children and continues to prioritize those investigations. By highlighting these efforts, Patel attempted to shift attention toward the broader mission of the FBI and its ongoing law enforcement activities. His response suggested that while debates about transparency are important, the Bureau's primary responsibility remains investigating crimes and protecting the public. As the hearing continued, it became clear that both sides were approaching the issue from different perspectives. Raskin focused on the expectation of transparency and the public statements previously made about the Epstein files. Patel, on the other hand, emphasized the legal limitations that govern what information federal investigators are allowed to release. The discussion therefore evolved into a larger conversation about accountability, legal procedure, and the responsibilities of federal agencies when handling sensitive evidence. This was only the opening stage of the hearing, but the exchange already demonstrated how contentious the topic remains. Questions about the Epstein investigation continue to generate strong reactions, both inside government institutions and among the broader public. As the hearing progressed, the tone of the conversation became even more direct. Lawmakers continued pressing for answers, while Patel maintained that the Bureau must operate strictly within legal constraints.
As the congressional hearing continued, the tone of the discussion gradually became more direct and intense. The earlier portion of the exchange had focused primarily on background statements and legal explanations, but now lawmakers began pressing more firmly for clarity about the decisions that had been made regarding the Epstein investigation. At the center of the debate remained FBI Director Kash Patel and Congressman Jamie Raskin, whose line of questioning continued to revolve around the issue of transparency in the case connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Raskin returned to the central point he had raised earlier in the hearing. He emphasized that Patel himself had previously argued that key information related to Epstein's network should be released publicly if the relevant authorities had access to it. According to Raskin, those earlier statements created a clear expectation that transparency would follow once Patel assumed a leadership position within the FBI. During the hearing, Raskin pointed out that Patel had now served as FBI director for several months. From Raskin's perspective, that period of time should have been sufficient for the Bureau to determine which materials could be released and to take the necessary legal steps to make those disclosures possible. He asked again why the full scope of Epstein-related records had not been made public, particularly if the FBI had previously indicated that it possessed important evidence connected to the case. Patel responded by reiterating the same position he had outlined earlier. He stated that the FBI had already released more information related to the Epstein investigation than had been disclosed in previous years. According to Patel, certain records had been made public during the current administration, and additional materials had been provided through legal channels. However, he maintained that the agency must follow the restrictions imposed by federal courts. Patel explained that several federal court orders limit how investigative materials connected to Epstein can be handled. These legal rulings, he said, prevent the FBI from unilaterally releasing certain documents without judicial approval. In his view, the Bureau had complied with the law by submitting requests to courts when appropriate and releasing whatever information judges determined could legally be disclosed.
Raskin, however, questioned whether those legal limitations accounted for the entire situation. He suggested that the public discussion surrounding the Epstein case has often centered on the idea that more information exists than what has been revealed so far. He asked whether additional evidence collected during searches of Epstein's properties, such as digital records, correspondence, or financial documentation, remains within government custody but outside public view. In response, Patel repeated that the FBI cannot disclose material simply because there is public interest in it. He emphasized that investigators must balance transparency with legal protections, including privacy rights, sealed evidence, and the terms of earlier legal agreements tied to the case. According to Patel, violating those rules could compromise both the legal process and the integrity of the investigation. At one point during the hearing, the discussion briefly shifted toward the broader timeline of the Epstein investigation. Patel noted that many of the original legal agreements and investigative actions related to the case were carried out years before his tenure at the FBI. He referenced earlier prosecutions and legal arrangements that took place long before the current leadership assumed responsibility for the Bureau. Patel also pointed out that law enforcement agencies often inherit investigations that have already been shaped by earlier legal decisions. In cases like this, he explained, those decisions can determine what evidence can be used, what material can be released, and what remains restricted under court authority. Raskin acknowledged that previous administrations and legal proceedings played a role in shaping the current situation. However, he continued to argue that the American public still expects clarity about the scope of Epstein's activities and the people who may have been connected to his network. From his perspective, congressional oversight exists precisely to examine how institutions respond to issues of public concern. As the exchange progressed, both sides appeared to stand firmly by their positions. Raskin maintained that Patel's earlier public statements suggested that greater transparency was both possible and necessary. Patel, meanwhile, continued emphasizing that his responsibilities as FBI director require strict adherence to legal procedures rather than public expectations alone. The discussion highlighted a recurring challenge in high-profile investigations, balancing public demands for openness with the legal framework that governs sensitive evidence. Cases involving allegations of large criminal networks often involve sealed documents, confidential testimony, and ongoing legal protections that can limit what investigators are permitted to disclose. Beyond the legal debate, the hearing also illustrated how political oversight functions in the United States. Congressional committees frequently call government officials to testify about controversial issues, particularly when those issues involve national institutions like the FBI. These hearings provide lawmakers with an opportunity to question officials directly and to raise concerns on behalf of their constituents. In this case, the hearing served as a platform for addressing long-standing public questions about the Epstein investigation. The exchange between Raskin and Patel demonstrated how lawmakers may use past statements, public interviews, and previous policy positions to challenge witnesses during testimony. For Patel, the hearing represented an opportunity to explain the Bureau's current approach and to defend its compliance with federal law. Throughout the discussion, he maintained that the FBI is committed to pursuing justice and protecting victims while also respecting the boundaries established by the courts. As the questioning moved toward its conclusion, the debate remained unresolved. Raskin continued to emphasize the importance of transparency and accountability, while Patel reiterated that the Bureau cannot release materials that are restricted by judicial authority. Neither side appeared to change its position significantly during the exchange. Nevertheless, the hearing underscored the continuing public interest in the Epstein case and the broader questions it raises about accountability in complex criminal investigations. Even years after Epstein's crimes became widely known, the topic remains a focal point for political debate, media coverage, and public scrutiny. For observers watching the hearing, the exchange illustrated how congressional oversight operates when lawmakers confront senior officials about controversial matters. The discussion also demonstrated how past statements and public expectations can influence the way political debates unfold, especially when they involve high-profile cases. While the hearing did not produce a definitive resolution regarding the release of additional Epstein-related materials, it did bring renewed attention to the ongoing conversation about transparency, legal limitations, and institutional responsibility. In the end, the confrontation between Congressman Jamie Raskin and FBI Director Kash Patel reflected a broader tension within democratic governance, the balance between the public's right to know and the legal obligations that government agencies must follow when handling sensitive evidence. As investigations and legal processes continue, the debate over transparency in the Epstein case is likely to remain part of the national discussion. Whether additional information will eventually be released remains uncertain, but hearings like this demonstrate how lawmakers continue to revisit the issue in search of answers. In the end, the confrontation between Congressman Jamie Raskin and FBI Director Kash Patel reflected a broader tension within democratic governance, the balance between the public's right to know and the legal obligations that government agencies must follow when handling sensitive evidence. As investigations and legal processes continue, the debate over transparency in the Epstein case is likely to remain part of the national discussion. Whether additional information will eventually be released remains uncertain, but hearings like this demonstrate how lawmakers continue to revisit the issue in search of answers.